So the Y6, they have a feud coming down the pipeline that could be absolutely epic. It could be cinema, of course, if done properly. But looking at it from the optimistic point of view, the possibilities that can come out of this feud is amazing. And I'm excited to talk to you guys about this. But before we get into the feud itself, let's just take a pause for a second and just chop it up a little bit about the Wyatt Six. What are the Wyatt Six? What are they after? What are their motivations and goals in life? What is in their dream journal? What do they think about every day when they wake up in the morning? So the Wyatt Six themselves, we already know, is a collective of individuals, which I consider one of the most interesting people on the main roster when it comes to Raw. And what's interesting about them the most is the practices that they take in order to get their point across. Because we saw what happened on Monday Night Raw when they debuted. Amazing debut. Chef's kiss, by the way. And when they came through, they murdered a ton of people on the roster, which was crazy and kind of shocking to see on TV. And yeah, I get it. And they didn't really murder people. I get that. But the visual of the point that they're trying to get across was very interesting. And what makes them more interesting is not just the lengths that they will take in order to get a point across. It is their motive behind the whole situation. It seems to be that although they are willing to murder people, they care a lot about the family dynamic. At least that's what we gather with their feud between them and Chad Gable, which is interesting because they could be Michael Myers at 4 o'clock and be Vin Diesel at 4:30. It's crazy, but all jokes aside, that type of personality makes a lot of the most interesting individuals in movies, in my personal opinion. Like one of the greatest supervillains of all time, Thanos. You may not agree with his practice as far as eliminating half of the world, but you understand his motivation behind it. You empathize and sympathize with him on that point, and it always makes somebody interesting because the question that people always ask, for the most part, or at least for me, is between their motive and between their practice, what happened between what wires got crossed to make them go in the direction that they were. And I think that always gives a lot of depth to characters in movies, and especially when it comes to the Wyatt Six. So what can make the perfect antagonist for the Wyatt Six and potentially create cinema for the fans? And that's important because that's going to play a role into what I'm talking about later. So with the Wyatt Six, from what we understand, it seems to be that family dynamic is important to them. And if you break that, if you turn on family, they don't like it that much. And if they catch you doing it, then their QR code and their logo is going to flash before your screen, and then your life is going to flash before your eyes. That's what it seems like is the case with them. So what will make the perfect dynamic is someone else who has similar motivations or have similar practices, but the worldview is completely different. Like for instance, if you read comic books or watch comic, movies or shows like that, or any shows in general, what makes a perfect hero and villain or anti-hero and villain dynamic is two individuals who have the same motive, and have a completely different worldview. Like for instance, they both can have the inspiration to change the world for the good. But the problem is, based on a worldview, based upon what they've been through, for the good can mean something completely different for both individuals. Destroying the world could be for the good, as I said with Thanos, and saving the world can be the good. And it makes it interesting because it's like, okay, when these individuals cross paths, will both of them stand on business? Will both of them stand on their morals and values? Or will one side convince the other side to cross over? Or will they meet somewhere in the middle? Or will they just continue to butt heads to the end? And I think that dynamic is going to be great in this feud that I'm talking about. So I know you're wondering, who exactly am I talking about? That's great movie and hero villain one-on-one, but how does this pertain to the Wyatt Six, and how are we going to get cinema out of this situation? So I had to explain it all to you guys first before I went into talking about these individuals, because if I did, you'll just turn it off completely. But the people I'm talking about is the Final Testament. I know what you guys are thinking. I'm stating the most obvious thing of sure, faction versus faction. But believe me, I've been watching wrestling for a long time. Faction versus faction doesn't always create the best storylines. There are some that are really terrible. But although the Wyatt Six versus the Final Testament is an obvious choice, there are some things that I feel like people haven't really talked about and what could make this whole dynamic very interesting. So what's going to make or break this feud at the end of the day? Now, although we already know the Wyatt Six is great and Bo Dallas is incredible, but what's going to have to really work here is Karrion Kross himself. He's really going to have to carry it on his shoulder, and this will be the moment for him to shine. Now, some of you guys may be thinking, well, if it's on the shoulders of Karrion Kross, we're cooked. This whole feud, take it and throw it in the garbage. No, don't do that, man, like that. Although they called him up to the main roster and had him dressed like 50 Shades of Kane, that's not his fault at all. But when he came back and he had the gimmick where he's like, the fate is in the cards. He took responsibility for Shinsuke turning heel, for Drew McIntyre turning heel. That character was so interesting, was so charismatic, charismatic, was so convincing. Him playing that methodic and sinister character is perfect for him. We even saw it in the promo that he had 2 weeks ago where he was talking about killing the old and introducing the new, and explaining that he had this issue because when he was brought up to the main roster, the legends didn't even look at him. They didn't even want to give him a chance because they knew that he was going to be a threat. And if you watch that promo, it is pretty good. The problem is a lot of people kind of don't really care from what I understand, but I think in this feud, people are really going to care about this man in this situation and the rest of the Final Testament for that most point. So from that promo, we understand that Karrion Kross has a huge problem with the wrestlers in WWE, specifically the legends, because he felt like when he got called up to the main roster, a lot of people didn't look at him in the eyes. They didn't want to really help him out. So he has this feeling of rejection. And from what he understands or what he believes, it's because he feels like that they believe that he was a threat. Now, that's that similarity thing I was talking about between a great hero and great villain dynamic. The feeling of rejection that he has is kind of the same thing that some of the members of the Wyatt Six feels, but they're handling it in 2 different ways. And to add on top of that, remember, the Wyatt Six seemingly don't like when people turn on their family and do their family wrong. And what has Karrion Kross been doing lately? He has been the main reason why a lot of people have been turning on their family and friends. Look what he did to Xavier Woods. Look what he did with The Miz. So at some point with the Wyatt Six in the Final Testament, because of Karrion Kross, with their contrasting morals and values, they're going to have to cross paths at one point or another, because one side is creating something that they do not like. And the main part that I'm really looking forward to, that I think is going to be so good, and this is going to make Karrion Kross win over the fans, is this conversation backstage in a pre-recorded promo between him and Uncle Howdy, Bo Dallas, with both of them sitting across from each other, trying to convince each other where they're wrong, because Karrion Kross seems like the person who does not get spooked out by the spooky things that the Wyatt Six does, and he will stand stubbornly on the way he feel. How would that conversation happen? Who will convert who to who? And even with the faction, what people in that group will get converted to understanding the other side, or how far would this whole feud go? I think they can really turn this from being seemingly like a horror film, which is one of my favorite type of genres, with the Wyatt Six seemingly like being like the Doubles Rejects and the Crazies and Hills Have Eyes, by turning this into a psychological thriller type of situation with the conversations between the 2 of them. I think this can be so good, and it's a perfect thing because the factions there. You got Nikki Cross, who can go against Scarlett Bordeaux, AOP versus Eric Rowan and Dexter Lumis, and of course Uncle Howdy versus Karrion Kross. So in that aspect, you already got that going on as far as in the ring, but the outside of the ring stuff can be so good if done right, and I have all the faith in the world in this era of WWE to handle this properly and blow this out the window. And after this is all over, Karrion Kross is going to benefit so much from this. Bo Dallas will benefit so much from this. And it's going to be amazing. I can't wait for this to happen. So let me know in the comment section what you guys think. Do you think this feud can be amazing? Or what will be a better faction versus faction feud for the Wyatt Six? I would love to hear what you guys have to say. Thank you guys so much for sitting here and listening to me yap about this whole situation. Salute, peace, have a good day.